and welcome to this webinar on how to manage your brand with Canva. We have a lot of amazing content to go through today, but before we do that, I would just like to do a quick introduction just so that you know who you're going to be spending the next 45 minutes of your time with. My name is Arturo. I'm a designer, and I have 8 years of experience working in the nonprofit sector. I have worked for the United Nations, I have worked for the World Economic Forum, and I have worked with a number of nonprofits all over the world, helping them with design, storytelling, and in general, elevating that brand through design. And right now I'm working as a design educator at Canva, and I'm sure that most of you will be familiar with Canva, but just in case some of you are not familiar with what Canva is your one-stop design platform. And it's really your go-to place for to create pretty much anything that you want to design, from your posters, your banners, your reports, all the way to your social media content, your presentation, even videos. You can do all of this without ever leaving Canva. And we have a very simple but bold and ambitious mission, which is to empower everyone, everywhere around the world, to unlock their creativity and improve their design skills. And we also have a second part to our mission, which is to do the most good that we can. And that means that we support nonprofits all over the world. And we're actually going to talk about this towards the end of the presentation, because if you're a nonprofit, you can have access to Canva Pro for nonprofits for free. And I'm going to be talking about that, about how to apply for a Canva Pro for nonprofits absolutely for free at the end of this presentation. So as I said, we have a lot of content to go through today. So this is a quick overview of today's agenda. If you've ever had any questions at all about branding, maybe you're going through a rebrand in your organization, or maybe you just want to wrap your head around what brand and branding can do for your nonprofit, or maybe you work with designers and you want to have, you want to have some language to work with your designers, whatever the case may be, today's session has something for you. So we're going to be looking at what a brand is in the first part of the presentation. Then we're going to go into the branding process. We're going to actually have a look at what actually what it means to create a brand. We're going to start with a strategy. Then we're going to go from strategy, from purpose, all the way to creating a visual identity. And then we're going to be talking about how to apply that visual identity to everything that you do for your nonprofits. And then thirdly, we're going to be going into Canva, and I'm going to show you how you can manage your brand with Canva. And then, of course, as Marcella already said, at the very end, there's also going to be some time for Q&A, so we can actually answer any questions that you may have on today's session. So without further ado, let's get started. And let's start with the basics, right? Today's session is all about branding. So the first question, of course, is what is a brand? What do we mean when we talk about brands? So these are some of the options, actually. I'd like to play a little game. I'd like to make this a little interactive. So these are 4 options that you have. And I'd like to see, actually, if you drop your answer in the questions box, what do you think? Off the top of your head, what would you say a brand is? Is it about your logo? Is it about your collateral? Is it about a tagline for your nonprofit? Is it about perception? What would you say brand actually means? I'll be curious to see what you guys are saying. All right. Some people are saying perception. Some people are saying all of the above. All right. Wow, thank you very much. I love this. All of the above. That's great. Actually, you guys are all correct. Actually, brand is first and foremost about perception, but it also has a very visual, a very tangible aspect to it. And we're going to cover all of this in today's session. So let's bust a few myths, but I think you guys, I'll go quite quickly through this because you guys seem to be in the know already. Myth number 1, most people think that, a brand is just a logo, and that branding is simply sticking your logo on everything that you do. But actually, brand and branding is something much more abstract in a way. It's something much more intangible. And the best definition of branding that I generally use when I try to explain what branding can do for your nonprofit is this. Brand is the gut feeling that people have when they hear your name. It's that kind of, it's that gut reaction, that gut feeling that the people have when they hear your nonprofit's name. And another myth surrounding brands and branding is that brand and branding is just something that applies to big corporations. You know, you think Coca-Cola, you think Starbucks, you think McDonald's, you think about these big names. But actually, that's not true. Anything can actually have a brand, and actually everything does have a brand. And I'd like to play another game with you just to keep this interactive. I'm actually going to mention 3 things, and I'd like you to close your eyes, just for a second, and just focus on what pops into your head when I pronounce these 3 words. Are you ready? Okay, let's do this. Close your eyes, and I'm going to start with the first word. The first word is Japan. What pops into your head when you hear the word Japan? If you want, you can also share some of that in the questions box. I'll be curious to hear what your thoughts are. Okay, Rebecca's saying a flag, anime, finale, very good. Cherry blossoms, another flag, sushi. All right. Thank you so much, guys. All right, so you see the gut feeling, the first thought that your mind goes to when you think of Japan, this is actually what a brand is. Let's continue with Mandela. What comes to mind if I say the word Nelson Mandela? Let's see, freedom, peace, freedom, South Africa, appetite. Very good, advocate. These are all incredible answers, and all of these answers are actually right, because a brand is something that has to do with how you feel about something, and we're going to actually come back to this point a little bit later on. Okay, let's do the third one, and then we'll swiftly move on to the rest of the presentation. Red Cross. What comes to mind when I say Red Cross? Helping people, safety, emergency, famine. Very good, absolutely. And that actually shows you how strong the Red Cross is. You're all saying very similar things, right? So that actually means that the Red Cross has been able to establish a very solid brand for itself. And as you can see, none of these things are actually big corporations. One is a country, one is a person, a political leader, and the third one is an international organization. And all of these things can actually evoke feelings and associations in your head. And so what this game was about was actually showing that a brand is really about these 4 things: how it makes people feel, what people think, what people imagine, and also what people remember from previous experiences with your brand. This is what your brand is for people. And in the words of Seth Godin, maybe some of you will know Seth Godin, he's a marketing expert, well known all around the world. And he basically put it in a much more eloquent way by saying that a brand is really the sum of all the expectations, all the memories, all the stories and relationships that, when taken together, account for why an individual decides to choose a specific product or a specific service or a specific nonprofit over another product, service, or nonprofit. And what does it actually mean to have a strong brand? Because people's perception and what you say about your nonprofit may actually be quite different. And that's when you have a brand problem. So having a strong brand actually happens at the intersection of these 2 things. On the one hand, there's what you say about your nonprofit. It's how you show up in the world. And then the second thing is how your audience feels about you, that gut feeling that we've been talking about. So when these 2 things overlap, this is when you have a strong brand. And the next question is, all right, we know what a brand is now, we know it, but why is it important? Why is it important to have a strong brand? And actually, there are 6 reasons why it's important to have a strong brand. The first one is that a strong brand helps your nonprofit stand out. And we all live in the attention economy. We're all competing, whether we like it or not, whether we are aware of it or not. We're all competing for those eyeballs, and right now, everything, if you put yourself in the shoes of other people, our phones, our smartphones mean that we get all our messages in the same platforms, from messages from our family and friends, all the way from messages from commercial companies, as well as messages from nonprofits. So everything is crowding, it's operating in the same space. And having a strong brand really helps you stand out in that crowded environment. Also, having a strong brand makes your communications clear and consistent, which is incredibly important because that as well helps you stand out. But having a strong brand is not just important externally for your audience, it also helps create internal consistency. If you have staff, maybe your nonprofit has offices, in different countries or in different cities in the same country. Maybe you work with volunteers, you work with contractors. And so having a strong brand also helps you and all the people that work with you for your nonprofit represent your brand in the best possible way and in a consistent way. Also, having a strong brand makes you recognizable, and with recognizability also comes credibility, right? By showing up consistently time and time again, you develop a sense of trust. Your audience starts trusting you and recognizing you, and it's that trust that actually ultimately will get you people's support and people's confidence in your ability to be credible and to deliver what you say you deliver for the communities that you serve. So really having a strong brand is fundamental. It's probably one of the most important and one of the best investments that you can do for your nonprofit. And if you don't believe this, then believe this piece of research by the Network for Good Digital Giving Index, which basically said that having a branded donate page leads to 6 times more money and more donations than a non-branded donate page. So this is, I think, a really interesting figure that we should all bear in mind. All right, so now that we know, now we're all reading from the same page when it comes to, the importance of branding and what we mean when we talk about brands, the next question is, how do you actually create a brand? And so there are essentially 3 phases that we're going to cover in the next part of this session. First of all, we're going to talk about having a brand strategy, and this is really a almost like a profound process. It's really about uncovering who you are as a nonprofit. Your purpose, what drives you. That's your brand strategy. Then once you have your brand strategy, then this is where you go into the visual side of things. This is where you develop what we generally call in jargon your brand identity. So this is your look and feel. These are all those things that usually people associate with brands. Your logo, your colors, and we're going to talk about that in a second. And then thirdly, once you have your brand identity worked out, the next challenge or the next thing to do is to apply that brand consistently. And so we're going to be talking about these 3 phases in a second. So let's start with brand strategy. But before we do that, I would like this section to also really be hands-on and practical. I just don't want to be doing all the talking here. So you can go to this link where you can grab your free workbook. If you have already a subscription with Canva, you can just grab your workbook. If you don't have a Canva account, you're going to have to sign up to access the material. But essentially, this workbook includes a series of exercises that are going to help you audit your brand and really see maybe where your weaknesses are, or help you kind of think through your brand if you're actually starting from scratch and looking for somewhere to start. So I'm going to leave this slide on for another couple of seconds just in case you want to grab your workbook, and I think Marcella is also going to share it in the chat.
Yes, it's already there. People can click on that link that I just posted into the questions box, and feel free to continue, Arturo. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcella. All right, so let's go into the thick of brand strategy. So essentially, a brand strategy has 4 main building blocks. It all starts with the why. It all starts with actually knowing who you are, why you exist, what purpose do you serve, and what's your story? What is the story behind your nonprofit? Why are you doing what you do? What is the kind of future? What is the kind of vision that you're trying to create day by day with your work? This is really the main core of your brand strategy. Then after the why comes the how. So how are you unique? You know, how do you differentiate yourself from other nonprofits that are operating in a similar space? And what makes you unique is probably going to be your values, the values that you live by, the values that you communicate in whatever you do, and also your personality. Something that we do as designers when we work with nonprofits is we actually challenge nonprofits to really think of themselves as people. You know, if your nonprofit were a person, what would they be? How would you describe them? What are the words that you would use to describe them? And this actually can be a very, very fun workshop, a very fun exercise that really leads to great visual identities. And so you're actually going to find an exercise in the workbook specifically about defining your values and your personality. After the how comes the what. So what is it that you actually do? You know, what is your product? What is your service? What programs do you put into place for the communities that you serve? So this is really the nuts and bolts of what you do on a daily basis. And then there is the who, right? So the who is really about anybody that is somehow related to your nonprofit. It can be your beneficiaries, you know, your target audiences, the people that you're trying to move to action, your beneficiaries. It can also be other stakeholders that you may have to work with, you know, in your nonprofit, but also your competitors. You know, nonprofits don't always think in terms of competition, but as we were saying before, we're all competing for the same eyeballs, and we're competing with other nonprofits, but we're also competing with commercial brands. We're also competing with friends and family, believe it or not, you know? So it's helpful to just, you know, map it all out and map out all the people that are somehow part of your ecosystem as a nonprofit. And I'd like to show you, just to make this a little bit more tangible, an example of a nonprofit that I think has really got that brand and that brand strategy right. This is Macmillan Cancer Support. It's a very famous, very well-known charity in the UK. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they've been in existence since 1911. And I think they really got their why, their how, their what, and their who right. And it's all here condensed in this one visual. You know, the why we exist is to help everyone with cancer live life as fully as they can. So they really help cancer patients and anyone who is affected by cancer, so even the families and friends of people affected by cancer, to live that life as fully as they can. They provide all sorts of support, information, emotional support, financial support to these people. And they have a set of values that really that they really live out across everything that they do. Empathy, proximity, resolution, inspiration, and empowerment. And we're going to have a look at how all these values and these stories, you know, and all these main building blocks, as it were, of that brand strategy are then translated into that visual identity. So there you go. Let's talk about brand identity now. So what is a brand identity? A brand identity is nothing but the visual manifestation of your purpose, your values, and your personality. So once you've got your why, your who, your how, your what figured out, then obviously you need to present yourself to the world somehow. And this is where your brand identity comes into play. So what does this actually mean in practice? What makes up your brand identity? We've got, again, 4 main building blocks. These are your logo, your fonts, your colors, and your visuals. And so we're going to go now into a bit more detail about each and every one of these 4 blocks. But first of all, I'd like to actually ask you a question. So again, go to the questions box and just off the top of your head, how strong do you think your brand identity is? If you were to put a number on it, you know, from 1 to 10, how strong do you think your brand is? All right, so Jessica is very confident about the brand of her nonprofit. Then we've got a 4, a 5, a 1. Okay, so this webinar hopefully will help you, and the workbook will really help you kind of think through your brand, hopefully, and make some changes. All right, so it's really a fair mix, you know, of different numbers. Okay, so hopefully the next session is really going to help you kind of think in new ways about what you can do to bring your brand identity up to scratch and really make sure that it reflects, you know, those values, the mission, the purpose, purpose, and the personality of your nonprofit. So let's go into the first section. Let's talk about your logo. So logos come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and just to make it simple, designers love to use a lot of complicated words and jargon to talk about what they do, but just to make it very, very simple, we essentially have three types of logos, as it were. We have logos that simply have some text that represents the name of your nonprofit or your company. Google is probably one of the most well-known word marks around the world, and they are very, very playful and creative, kind of adapting and playing with that word mark every single day. But we also have other non-profits, for example, the Water Trust or Mind, which is another UK-based non-profit that essentially use their the name of their non-profit as their brand. And as you can see already, the logo, these two logos tell a whole story about what these nonprofits do. The Water Trust clearly, has a message about water, and Mind, in a way, already translates that idea of, hey, we can help you if you're dealing with mental health problems. If you're struggling with your mental health, we can actually turn that confusion and that and those problems, we can make it better, right? And you can see that squiggle kind of transforming itself into the name of the nonprofit. So this is a wonderful example of how even something so small and something so simple like a logo can actually tell a whole story, a whole universe about your nonprofit. And this is exactly what good branding is about, a good brand identity. But then you also have other examples. We can see Apple, we can see Nike, we can see Starbucks. So these brands, more often than not, really use just a symbol, just an icon, to represent their brand. And then we have, more often than not, I think this is probably 80% of companies and nonprofits, there is usually a combination of text and a symbol. So we can see the WWF, Peace Corps, and Oxfam. And you can see, again, that even in these other three examples, there's so much in terms of messaging, in terms of purpose, in terms of mission, in terms of what these nonprofits stand for, just in the logos. There's a whole story. And so the first question that I would ask, in your nonprofit, how is my logo actually telling that story? How is my logo communicating that purpose, that mission, that unique personality that I want my nonprofit to be known for? Something else that we should consider when talking about logos is having different color versions. We know that we need to use that logos across many different channels, many different platforms. And so it's super important to make sure that our logo works well against different colors and different kind of backdrops. So this is an example from Dropbox, where you can see that the logo is used in different colors. They play with the colors of the icon and the colors of the text to make sure that it works against multiple types of backgrounds and multiple colors. And something else also that, a lot of companies, but also nonprofits are doing more and more, particularly now that everything has moved really to a digital space, is to make sure that you have different logo variations. And this gives you a lot of flexibility, particularly when you're creating digital products. So for example, if you have an app and you need to have that 1:1 ratio, that little square, and you need to make sure that your logo fits in that tiny little 1:1 square, then this is where having different logo variations really helps. And you can see some examples here from major brands. So in the workbook, I'm not going to go through these questions in great detail, but in the workbook, you can actually find some of these key questions, that if you're going through a rebrand or if you're starting your nonprofit brand from scratch, these are key questions that you need to ask. Obviously, first of all, do you have a logo? Secondly, super crucial question, how does my logo actually express my brand strategy? How does it express who I am as a nonprofit? And then, of course, also what kind of logo is it? Is it just a symbol? Is it a word mark? Do we actually want that flexibility of having both? Do we have different color versions? Does that logo work well against different types of backgrounds? And also, does it work well at big sizes, but also at small sizes for digital products? Or do we actually need to have a couple of logo variations to give ourselves that flexibility? All right, so let's move on to the second building block of our brand identity, which is color. And just to make it very, very simple, the main message here is that as a nonprofit, your brand identity needs what we call a color palette, right? So this is a color scheme that is usually made up of three types of colors. You've got your primary colors, and this could be one color or maybe 2 or 3 colors, and these are usually the colors that you can also find in your logo. Then you have a bunch of secondary colors which are used to complement your primary colors, and this is where you basically have maybe 6 or maybe even 10 secondary colors, and then you have a third category, which is accent colors. Now these colors are usually they provide contrast. You see, for example, in this color scheme, everything is very much about purple, and so that yellow, even if it's used in small quantities, really helps you helps your message stand out. So maybe if you have a shape that's yellow or a piece of text that's yellow, it's going to create a lot of contrast and it's going to stand out. It's going to help that information stand out in whatever it is that you're creating, whether it's a social media post or a report or a poster or what have you. And then on top of these 3 types of colors, you also need to account for all those what we call neutral colors. So things like your blacks, your grays, your whites. So also these are colors that should be part of your color scheme. And there you go. Here you can see, for example, what the color scheme for Starbucks is. So they have that, iconic green that, we've come to recognize, wherever we go in most cities, we can find a Starbucks, and, just that green is just unmistakably Starbucks. But then on top of that, you also have like different shades of green. One is lighter, one is darker. So they really complement that primary green very well. And you also have an accent color, which in Starbucks' case is just a slightly brighter green that they use. And then of course they have a whole set of like blacks and neutrals and grays and whites, and neutral colors that can be really, really important as well for your brand. And something that is also very helpful to know, particularly if you work with designers, or we're going to talk about Canva later, is that colors on the web are marked essentially by what we call a hex code. And a hex code is nothing but a string of 6 digits, generally letters or numbers, and those numbers really identify a specific color on the web. So if you're creating your brand identity right now, it's super important for you to have your hex codes, or to work with a designer to get those hex codes and apply them consistently across everything that you do. And you can see Starbucks does it very well, whether it be the signage outside of their stores, whether it be merchandise, whether it be posters, anything they do really uses those colors massively, and that creates that recognizability that we were talking about before, that consistency both internally and externally that people then come to realize and appreciate. So there you go. Here are some questions, for you to go through in your own time, just to make sure that you've got your color palettes right. How do your colors express your brand personality? How many colors do you have? Do you have, a differentiation between primary, secondary, accent colors, and neutral colors as well? And then how consistently are your colors applied throughout your communications and your outputs? So there you go. Now let's move on to the third part of our brand identity, which is all about typography and fonts. So just to make it, again, very, very simple, there are essentially 3 different types of fonts. Fonts come in all shapes and sizes. I have probably thousands of fonts on my laptop, which is a very designer thing to do. But just to make it very, very simple, if you for your nonprofit, what you need to know is that there are essentially 3 categories. There are serif fonts, sans serif fonts, and display fonts. Now, serif fonts are essentially fonts that have, if you see like those circles, you have those tiny strokes, those tiny elements, at the end of the letter forms, and those are known as serif. And they're usually very classic. You can find, serifs in old newspapers. If you look at the New York Times or the Washington Post, generally newspapers really used serif fonts a lot. They really have that classic, traditional feel to them. Then you have sans serif, which basically means without serifs. And as you can see, pretty much the word says it all. These are fonts that don't come with those decorative elements at the end of the letter forms. And so they are very legible, very readable, very easy on the eye. And then a third category is display fonts. So display fonts are really kind of creative fonts. They really communicate a whole mood, a whole atmosphere. So generally when we do, like, I don't know, birthday invites or horror movies, and you can see those fonts that basically look like blood, those are very expressive fonts that communicate a mood, and that known as display fonts. And you can see some examples here of very well-known fonts, serifs, sans serifs, and display fonts. So just at a glance, you can definitely tell the serif fonts look much more traditional, much more elegant, some would say. Sans serif fonts are very straightforward. They're all about legibility and readability, so they're very good, for accessibility purposes as well. And then display fonts are very diverse. They come in all shapes and sizes, and they really communicate, an entire mood. Something else about fonts is that generally what I would suggest you do for your nonprofit, if you're looking for fonts right now, is to go for fonts that come in families. And a font family is nothing but a set of fonts that basically come in different weights. So for example, you have Gatwick that you can see on this slide here. It comes in 3 different weights. It comes in bold, regular, and light. And the bigger the font family, the more flexibility you have. So you see, for example, with Montserrat, you have 6 different weights. And this is the type of fonts that we should be looking for, because we need different weights in order to create contrast and hierarchy in our visual communications. So if you're rebranding or creating your brand right now, always go for font families that have multiple font weights in them. And this is exactly what I was talking about when we have, when we're trying to put together a brand identity. It's super important to have a font hierarchy. So we want to make sure that we make choices in terms of how our headlines are going to look, what our subheadings are going to look like, what our body copy is going to look like, what our captions are going to look like across different communications products. And so by using a font family, you really have all that flexibility to play with different weights, with different sizes, and so on and so forth. A font hierarchy can also include multiple fonts. So for example, we can have one specific font for headings, those parts of text, those pieces of text that we want to make bold because we want to get people's attention. And so we may choose a specific font for our headings, but then stick to the same font for all the rest of our copy. And generally a good, sometimes, particularly when we're starting out as designers, we'll tend to go crazy and we want to use 5 different fonts, 10 different fonts. But generally in design, less is really more. It's helpful to really start, that's my suggestion for a lot of nonprofits, it's really to stick to one font family, and really play with the different weights within that same font family. Or at best, use maybe one specific font, maybe a display font for your headings. If you're doing a campaign, for example, you may want to use a specific font for that. But really, less is more. Be simple, but at the end of the day, make sure that you have enough variety to create that differentiation, that hierarchy in the way you present your information. So there you go. If you go to the workbook, again, you can find all these different questions that are going to help you, just audit your brand or make good typography choices. So that leads me to the fourth and last building block of our brand, which is all about images and visuals. And this includes anything from photography all the way to illustration, but also iconography. You know, if you have icons for your website, etc., this is all part of the most visual aspect of your brand. And it's really important to be intentional about the type of visuals that we use, because visuals are an incredibly important part of what makes you recognizable to people's eyes, to what creates that gut feeling. I would say, yes, this looks unmistakably like that nonprofit. And so it's really important to make those decisions up front. What type of photography do we want to go for? You know, do we want close-ups? Do we want moody photography? Do we want bright photography? Do we want to play with specific filters and specific effects? And so on and so forth. And the same goes for illustrations. You know, do we have a specific illustration styles that we want to develop and that we want to apply? And same thing for iconography. You know, sometimes when we're in a bit of a rush, it's very easy to just select, you know, random images and stick them in and move forward. But actually that dilutes your brand over time. So you really want to make sure that you're intentional about creating photography repositories and really use that same style, that same look and feel over and over in your communication. And so this is an example from Nike. You know, of course, they have access to, you know, amazing photographers, amazing models. So I know that it's an easy example to provide, but I think it can be a very good source of inspiration, because they are incredibly consistent in the way they shoot their photography. So you see, it's always moody. There's always a lot of contrast, you know, between light and shadow. You have these very dynamic movement. You have these very dramatic poses, and that really is a huge part of that brand. It's about that swoosh, that movement, you know, that dynamic nature of the brand that they want to convey even through their photography. So these are a few questions, again, that you know, you can go through in your own time to really make sure that your photography is communicating, is expressing your nonprofit's brand. So what kind of content do you want your photos to include? Is it more about maybe products? Is it more about lifestyle? Do you really want to show pictures of your community going about their lives? Is it more about nature? For example, if you work with you know, on sustainability, maybe animal welfare, is it more about really close-up portraits of people to get that storytelling across? So what kind of mood do you want to convey? How do you want people to feel after looking at your photography? This is a very important questions. And also, is there a particular editing style that you want to go for, a specific type of crop that you want your pictures to have over and over again? What kind of people do you want to be in your photography? Is there a dominant color that you want to use for your photography? And last but not least, as we said, it's also very helpful to have a set of illustrations or a set of iconography, a set of icons that you can use over and over again. And again, we mentioned Macmillan Cancer Support earlier on as an example of a nonprofit that has really, you know, done an amazing job with getting that brand identity right. So we were talking about the brand strategy, you know, those values, that personality, that story that Macmillan Cancer Support has in the UK, and it's really great to see how then all of that strategy then translates into that brand identity. We can see, for example, that logo is very organic. You know, you have this like very soft, rounded kind of shapes, and that really is about the mood, you know, the positive mood, the mood of that message of empowerment and joy that they want to communicate. You know, life continues, life can be full, life can be joyful even when you have cancer. This is the message that they want to convey, and the logo really conveys that, both through the shapes of the logo, but also through the color. You know, green is usually associated with hope and with openness. And that message really continues with the fonts as well. They have their own font, which is the one that they use for that logo. And they also have Helvetica, a very sans serif font, as we now know. Very simple, very easy to read. And then this is also conveyed again by the same color. They're very consistent in the way they use color, and we're going to have a look at some examples now. And also their imagery is always very consistent here. I've just used a couple of examples of their illustration style. It's very simple, very organic illustrations, but also very colorful, very joyful, and they really are part and parcel of that brand and brand identity. And there you go. Now we're going to talk about exactly that. Now that we've got our brand identity sorted out, you know, we know how we want to look and feel, we know how we want to show up and present ourselves. How do we actually apply it? Now, we know that we live in a very visual world right now. Communication is everywhere. It cuts across print, digital, but also experiential. You know, if you have events, if you organize, for example, fundraising events as part of the work of your nonprofit. And so it's really important to think is all of this as communications outputs. You know, these are all channels where it's important to show up consistently. And this is how Macmillan does it. You know, you can see from their printed collateral, from their print collateral, their reports, all the way to their website, all the way to, you know, their social media or their merch. You know, everything speaks the same language. You can definitely see the same typography. You can definitely see the same colors. You can see a very consistent type of photography. It's very much about people and people's faces and capturing people's expressions, people's humanity. So all of this really speaks the same visual language. It's really amazing how they worked on that branding. And this also applies to their campaigns. You know, I always say that campaigns are a visual extension of your brand. Sometimes, you know, nonprofits like to, you know, switch things up and maybe create something completely different, you know, for a specific campaign. But actually, that's something that I would caution against, because you want people to connect your campaign to your bigger brand. You don't want your campaign to look like something completely different. You want your campaign to simply build on your brand and work as an extension of it. And here you can see this Brave the Shade campaign is a campaign that Macmillan have been running for a few years now. I think they started in 2015, and it's immediately recognizable. You know, even if you didn't have the Macmillan Cancer Support logo, by now you would actually recognize that this comes from Macmillan because of the colors, again, because of the font, because of the illustrations, because of the photography. Everything about that brand is incredibly cohesive. So the question is now, you know, now that we know all of this about you know, what a brand is, all the different things that you have to do to create a brand and to go from purpose to identity, the key question is, how do you actually manage it? You know, and this is where Canva can really help you do that. There you go. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you an example of a nonprofit, you know, a made-up nonprofit called Ocean.org, and something that if you have a Canva Pro account, something that you can do in Canva is actually set up a brand kit. Now, a brand kit is essentially a repository where you can basically centralize all the building blocks of your brand identity. So you can upload your logo in all its different variations, all its different colors. You can upload your fonts. You can upload your photos and imagery. You can upload your fonts and all the different stylings, all the different weights and sizes that come with your font. And you can then simply apply it with just a couple of clicks to everything that you do in Canva. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a quick video just to show you exactly how that works in Canva. It's really amazing just how you can do all of this with just a few clicks.
Make sure that you are sharing your screen.
Your nonprofit brand in Canva is by creating a brand kit. On the homepage, click brand kit.
Sorry, we're not seeing your screen. Do you want to reshare it?
Oh, maybe there's something. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Let me see if there's a problem when I play the video. Let me just try this.
The best way to manage your nonprofit brand in Canva is by
what
creating
I'm seeing
a brand
is the Canva website, not the video.
Click brand kit.
Oh, okay.
Give your kit a name.
Really sorry
there you
about that.
go.
I think there must be a
I think it
problem.
was. The video is actually.
It was working. It was
Okay.
working.
Yeah,
It was
sorry.
working. Okay, let's try
Go
third
back
time
to the
lucky.
beginning.
I'll just shut up.
The best way to manage your nonprofit brand in Canva is by creating a brand kit. On the home page, click Brand Kit. Give your kit a name. Upload your logo in all its versions. Upload them all here like this. Next, create a color palette of your brand colors. For each color, add the hex code. This is a string of 6 digits that uniquely defines the color on the web. Create as many palettes as you need. Finally, select your official brand font and style. If your brand fonts are not in the dropdown, upload them into Canva. And your brand kit's done. Time to apply it to your design. Let's start with a template. In the side panel, click More and then Style. Notice your brand kit here. Click your brand fonts to apply them to existing text. Click your color palette to shuffle through color combinations. And have fun experimenting with designs, letting Canva do the hard work for you.
Okay, I hope that worked this time.
Worked perfectly.
Fantastic. So this is just a quick example of how you can easily create a brand kit in Canva and then simply apply it with just a couple of clicks to everything that you do. So a brand kit really takes a lot of the guesswork, out of creating branded assets. And it's a really amazing tool. But obviously there is so much more that you can do in Canva that unfortunately I don't have enough time for today. But you can essentially create folders and stay organized, particularly if you work on designing content with other members of your team. You can also create templates and easily share them both inside and outside of your nonprofit. You can work collaboratively with different people on the same documents. And also something that we added recently, which is incredibly useful if you're active on social media, is that you can schedule your posts and track your analytics from within Canva. And last but not least, you can also make videos. We all know that visual storytelling is incredibly important for any nonprofit. And actually this video that I just, tried to play for you, I simply edited. I put it together in half an hour, I would say, in Canva. So this really shows you, hopefully, just how powerful Canva can be for your nonprofit. And once again, I just want to share a few resources for you guys. I promised that at the end of the presentation, I would share some material so that you can keep learning about branding and about Canva. So first of all, of course, your workbook. If you're tuning in just now and you want to, do an audit of your brand, just go to this link and grab a copy of your workbook. It will work seamlessly if you already have a Canva account, whether it's a free or pro account. If you're not signed up on Canva yet, you will have to sign up in order to access the document. And then, even more importantly, I have a really great message that I really want to share with all the nonprofits that are here on this webinar today. And that is that if you're a nonprofit, a social impact organization, or a health organization, you can actually apply for Canva Pro completely for free. This is actually something that Canva does to support nonprofit organizations and social impact organizations all around the world. So all you need to do is simply go to this link, and I believe Marcella is also copying that link in the chat for you. Simply go to canva.com/nonprofits, and on the website you will find all the information that you need in order to apply. The eligibility guidelines and also the application form, and it really takes just not even 5 minutes to apply. So whether you're not on Canva, whether you're on a free account, etc., really apply now for a Canva for Nonprofits account. You can apply for yourself and up to 10 members of your team. And I think that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for sticking with me for these 45 minutes. I think we actually have some time. We ran actually over time, but if there are any questions, any quick questions that I can answer, I'm happy to stay online for another 5 minutes and have a bit of a chat with you guys.
Awesome. So wonderful. I know you're going to do questions. I'm going to let you take it over with Marcella here. I'm just going to let folks who are asking. First of all, so many people are saying this is super helpful and thank you for hosting. And this is awesome. I can't agree more. We at Charity House who love Canva, we think it's awesome. And second of all, I just want to let you know I put in the chat box for you a link to our partners who are Nonprofit Library, and they're doing a webinar that covers the free program for nonprofits completely. And guess who's going to be there? Arturo, yay! Okay, so I'll let you take it away, and we've helped flag some of those questions for you. Feel free to help out Marcella there as well.
Okay, yeah, Marcella, if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you want me to read them to you? We flagged them for you.
Please, yes.
Okay, so Jennifer asks, what's the best way to ensure your hex codes translate from online to print consistently?
Yes, well, actually, you can, if you're using Canva, you can actually, your hex codes is all you need. You can basically just actually place an order for print directly within Canva. And what you can do is you can get a proof just to make sure that your colors match perfectly with the colors of your brand. So it's actually really, really simple. But if you're also working with, professional designers, they can also advise, there is also Pantone codes, Pantone colors that, match specific colors on the web. So if you have those as well and you want to communicate them to your print partners or your print shops or whatever, you can also do that, of course.
Thank you. Let's see. Lauren asks, there are a lot of webinars that say that using less professional photographs, etc., it's better. I'd like to get your thoughts on on that with regard to branding.
Yes, I mean, I could give you a long-winded answer, but I think the long and short of it is that it really depends. It really depends again on the brand strategy. If your brand strategy is all about connecting, on that kind of visceral level, in a really humane way, and you really want to show real pictures from maybe the communities that you're working with, then obviously you don't need to hire, fancy photographers and have a massive, photography budgets. It's obviously helpful to have somebody who knows how to take, good photographs, but it's really a choice that depends on your own nonprofit, on the structure that you have, on the budget that you have, and also on how you want to communicate, how you want to show up in the nonprofit space. So of course it's possible, yeah, and definitely there's been a trend over the past few years of going from, moving away from glossy pictures and glossy photo shoots to communicate that humanity and the uniqueness of the human experience. So definitely you can do that.
Wonderful. Jennifer asks, how can I ensure the brand is consistent throughout all events, appeals, etc., with various themes and purposes for each?
Yeah, so basically what you can do, for example, I'm assuming that this question is about, how you can do that in Canva. I mean, there are lots of ways in which you can do this, but if you're using Canva, if you're using Canva Pro and have access to the brand kit, you can basically create multiple brand kits. So if you have like sub-brands, or if you have specific sub-brands for specific events or for specific, partnerships and things like that, you can definitely create multiple sub-brands. As I mentioned as well, you can create folders and you can create templates. So by creating templates, you can basically share them with your team members, and you can share them externally as well. And that means you can lock certain elements, for example, your logo or maybe some background elements that you have on your documents, and you can just make sure that people edit the bits that you need them to edit. So that is a very easy way to make sure that you're working collaboratively with a lot of people, with all the people that are involved in your workflow, but at the same time you can ensure that the brand is applied consistently.
Great, thank you. Fernanda asks, is it possible that other members of my team can see the photos that I have uploaded into Canva?
Well, yes and no, it depends. So when you upload a photo on Canva, you have your elements, right? So that photo will show up in your elements. It won't show up in your team members' elements. I'm 95% sure of that, because that's really something that you do on your account. But what you can do is you can basically create photo repositories. So you can set up folders with key photographs that maybe you want to use for an event or for your brand, you know, for your communications outputs, whatever it may be, and then share them with the rest of the team, and everybody will have access to that photography.
Thanks, Arturo. Okay, Lauren asks, how do we best match up our branded fonts with the fonts in Canva? Sometimes they are not the same.
Okay, so this is a very good question. Thank you so much for asking. This is where having Canva Pro really helps, because with Canva Pro you can actually unlock a lot of features that you don't have with a free plan. So Brand Kit is one of them, which is incredibly important, as we've seen. But also with Canva Pro, you can basically upload fonts. So if you have your OTF or TTF, you know, font files, you can basically upload them in Canva, and it literally takes one click, and there you go. You have all your custom fonts ready to be applied as part of your brand kit. So it's really that simple.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, Christine asks, do you have any tips for small nonprofits? The one I work for is 5 people. Not everyone is full-time, so branding feels a little overwhelming through dope, obviously.
Yeah, of course. I mean, branding is, I mean, this is just, you know, I tried to condense. I'm really sorry if it was a bit overwhelming, because I realized that I've condensed, you know, years and years of work on branding in just 45 minutes. Of course, branding is a long game. You know, it's not something that you can do and in you know, in a week. It's definitely something that is part and parcel of the story of your nonprofit. But there's definitely a lot that you can do. We have tons of resources, for example, on our Canva school. If you Google Canva Design School, you can find tons of courses on anything from graphic design all the way to branding, presentations. I'm actually working on right now on a specific course on how to use Canva for nonprofits, where I basically cover anything from making videos to creating social media posts. And there's really a lot of information out there, and I think probably that the Canva Design School website is a good place to start if you don't have a lot of time and you just want to, you know, up your design game quickly.
Thank you. Brenda asks, is Canva ready for accessibility laws that are coming soon? I want a webinar that indicated Canva is not accessible. I want to a webinar that indicated Canva is not accessible friendly.
Okay, well, that would be actually really, we have a team that actually focuses on accessibility issues, and as you can probably tell, you know, if you've been using Canva for a while, you know, the platform is constantly changing. I mean, it's incredible to think that Canva actually has only been around for something like 7 years. It's actually a super new company, and we're constantly adding new features. We're constantly working and updating and improving the platform. So definitely, if you have any feedback, actually, about accessibility. It's not necessarily my forte, but if you have any specific feedback on things that you see lacking or missing, definitely please get in touch, because we really welcome that feedback in terms of how we can improve Canva and make it truly inclusive for everyone. We definitely do that with photography. We try to make a photography ever more inclusive, and we're working with photographers from all around the world to make sure that our database, for example, reflects diversity in an authentic, you know, respectful way. But there's definitely, I'm sure, a lot that can be done on the accessibility and usability front on the platform. So please share your feedback with us. We really welcome it.
Great. And I think we have just enough time for a couple more questions, and then that's it. Susie asks, in addition to using the brand kit, what tips can you share to a team to best organize the material that quickly accumulates in a shared account?
Definitely folders. I mean, when I started using Canva, I wasn't using folders at all, and so this really comes from a place of experience. You know, if you're working on a lot of materials with a lot of team members, definitely folders are your best friend. And you can also create, you know, within one folder, you can create subfolders, which is great. So you can, this is really your best ally if you are working with a lot of material. And also templates. You know, templates are also great because you can easily share templates with your team members, and they're not gonna they're gonna be able to edit the template, but they're not gonna edit the source file. So the source file, if you like, can stay with you. It's your source of truth, and that's the best way to also work, for example, with external designers. You know, if you have design contractors that you use from time to time, we also have, as part of our teams, we have different access rights. So you can be an administrator, you can be a team member, or you can be a template designer. And these all come with different things that you can or cannot do. And that really helps kind of structure and streamline your entire workflow. So these would definitely be the two things that I would recommend.
Thank you. And then last question, Jennifer asks, since you mentioned analytics, what analytics are tracked? Does it connect to social media as well as websites, newsletters, and translations from one to the other?
Okay, wow. So that's, I'm not sure I have the answer to all of these different parts of your questions, but definitely you can track, you know, depending on the social media platform, you can basically track basic analytics, you know, like impressions and shares and likes, and things like that. And you can do all of that through the content planner, which is basically the calendar, the scheduling function that you find within Canva. I know that something new that has been introduced recently is that you can also have multiple social media accounts. So, for example, you can monitor multiple Facebook accounts if you work for different nonprofits, or if your nonprofit has different Facebook accounts, for example. So this is something that that you can easily do with Canva. But again, as I said, we're constantly improving our features. So there's definitely more to come in that space.
Thanks, Arturo. Thanks so very much. That is those are all the questions that we have. So thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. Just know that the webinar recording will be available for you by tomorrow morning in your Charity How To library. And also make sure to take a look at the link that Kurt just posted into the questions box to the place where you can register for Nonprofit Library. They are our partners, and they are doing a webinar with Arturo again 3 days from now about the Canva Pro, how to apply if your nonprofit is eligible or not, and make sure to click on that link. And I'm not sure if you want to say something else, Kurt, or
really fast. Yes. Well, I will simply say we love the Charity How To community. You are everything, and we appreciate you being here. And we really appreciate Arturo from Canva for presenting today. It means a lot to us. So thank you so much. And I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you for all your great comments.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day. And please complete the survey that will pop up once we close the webinar, because your comments will help us improve our content. It's anonymous and it takes you 60 seconds to complete. Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.